With the final 3 episodes looming around the corner, Shōgun is still keeping us second-guessing every move that Yoshi Toranaga makes. In the past 2 weeks, we saw the episodes operate like a standardized test question. Mariko has straight up asked John to maintain his distance with her. Buntaro has been ordered by Toranaga to give his wife a week's break from his daily abuse. Ochiba in Ishido has selected Lord Ito to be the council's 5th regent, and Lord Sugiyama's entire family has been killed off after he refused to listen to Ishido's orders. In this mess, devoid of the political chaos, only one person seems to make sense, and that's Lord Toranaga. He is the only one wise enough to figure out the crazy, complicated chess play of 17th century Japan, and even though he has more trivial matters to attend to, his vassals keep irritating him with outlandish complaints. Now I'm talking about the rotten bird issue, the forbidden romance, and of course, the consequences of having a thick-headed son. A stick of time is Toranaga's rodeo right from the very beginning. Episode 7 gives you jitters of shock from the very first minute and retains the adrenaline rush to the very end. So without wasting a stick of time, let's discuss what went down in the latest Shōgun release. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. A 46-year-old flashback takes us to Lord Toranaga's first battle. Every legend you have been told is most possibly a lie, which has been passed around through so many ears that the original version is hardly remembered by anyone. Episode 7 begins with an important flashback featuring Toranaga's first battle as a child. As a 12-year-old, Toranaga suddenly found himself in a position of power without ever being prepared for the responsibilities that came along with it. The scene opens at the end of a huge battle. We see dead bodies of samurais strewn on the ground, a tattered flag flapping in the wind, fiery arrows sticking out of the earth like angry thorns, followed by a guy announcing the end of a war won by Yoshi Toranaga. Even the young warlord seemed to be surprised by the outcome. He's led to a tent where his opponent Lord Mizoguchi congratulates him and insists Toranaga to make sure his scribes know that he fought with honor but was bested by the boy warlord he had severely underestimated. Mizoguchi then proceeds to take off his armor, kneels down and asks Toranaga to be his second in assisting as he prepares to embrace seppuku. Before piercing his sword through his gut, Mizoguchi wishes that in his next life, he gets to be the one with a sword ready to take Toranaga's head. We see young Toranaga standing next to a 20-year-old General Hiromatsu, positioned to behead Mizoguchi as he plunges a sword into his own belly. I mean, a 12-year-old in this era is probably busy playing video games, but Toranaga was out there winning battles. Stories of his victories were spread far and wide of the boy who chopped off Mizoguchi's head in one swift stroke, or so they were told. The significance of this flashback reverberates through the entire episode, something which we will discuss when the time is right. Toranaga's half-brother arrives, shaking things up in Ajiro. In the present day, we see Toranaga and his soldiers waiting for his brother, Lord Saiki Nobutatsu, with high hopes of securing his help in the Crimson Sky mission that the daimyo declared in the last episode. Finally, after Saiki arrives with his army, the brothers dismount their horses and bow in their long-awaited reunion. Following this, Saiki mentions passing a decimated troop, and Toranaga explains how his army suffered a brutal earthquake. This causes Saiki to point out the obvious, how in Toranaga's time of need the Lord had no choice but to seek help from his mediocre brother. This meeting is already a very tense affair, with a lot at stake given that Toranaga's entire future hinges on Saiki not being resentful from living in the shadows of his much more famed brother and taking advantage of Toranaga's weakened position. So there's a sense of relief when Toranaga takes the teasing as a joke and they both share a good laugh. Like every other person of importance in Shōgun, Saiki's eyes land on John Blackthorne, leading Toranaga to summon John and introduce him as his Hatamoto. John further lightens the mood when he respectfully greets Saiki in fluent Japanese, surprising everyone. Toranaga then boasts about John's cannon tactics to Saiki, suggesting they discuss them further the next day, as now he has planned a joyful reunion for his brother. Up until now, it seems like a successful interaction, especially when Saiki expresses his honor to fight alongside his brother, assuring everyone that Crimson Sky might just work. On a side note, did anyone notice how regal Psyche's pointy Kabuto helmet looked? Even though it looked like a dorsal fin mounted on his head, the craftsmanship of the helmet was absolutely stunning. After returning back to his camp, Toranaga prepares to arrange the best night for his brother. He complains to Mariko about the high cost of securing Kiku's services for Psyche for a week and is further annoyed after finding out that Jin reduced the price in exchange for a stick of his time. Now, this is a very popular phrase which draws its reference from incense clocks where time is measured based on the burning of sticks of incense, offering a visually poetic way to track minutes and hours. Unlike today's digital timers, this historical practice actually originated first in the Song dynasty of China and is really a fitting choice of title for this episode, as the characters, heroes, and villains alike find themselves in a waiting period throughout much of the episode. But the episode is far from dull, as the atmosphere is thick with anticipation, reminiscent of scented smoke that hangs in the air, creating a hazy and mysterious vibe. Anyways, Toranaga and Mariko's conversation pauses when John arrives. The daimyo then advises him to be on his best behavior during dinner and to leave his pistol behind, replacing them by carrying swords like a true Hatamoto. Following this, John asks Toranaga about the Crimson Sky, expressing his hope to reunite with the Erasmus and attack Osaka from the harbor. When the Anjin persists with more questions about ignoring Mariko's plea to drop it, Toranaga firmly shuts down the discussion, saying he hasn't made any decisions yet, so John finally backs off after assuring Toranaga that he was ready to fight for the Lord no matter what their fate may bring. Meanwhile, Omi tries his best to meet Kiku, but Jin offers him to pick someone else instead. To this, Omi is visibly annoyed and mentions how the Willow world has been soiled after the barbarians' visit. Jin cunningly drops a hint about John and Mariko's affair by mentioning how his mind was stuck on someone else even though he spent the night with Kiku. In the next scene, we witness Hiromatsu visit Fuji, presenting her with the ashes of her child and husband. Naturally, Fuji gets a bit teary-eyed, vowing to join her family in death once she is free from her duty. When Hiromatsu encourages her to continue living the glory they died for, Fuji briefly doubts that Toranaga's plans would secure them a win. Hiromatsu is practically glaring at her audacity, and Fuji quickly rephrases her sentence, assuring him that their victory is certain, especially because his son Buntaro is fighting. The Dinner of Betrayal. At dinner, Toranaga is seemingly blinded by the joy of doubling his army through his brother's arrival. On the other hand, the seating arrangement at the dinner party makes things worse, as John ends up sitting next to Mariko while Buntaro sits right to their opposite, watching them exchange a few words every now and then. The tension at the table is palpable, as the samurai watches Blackthorne struggle with his chopsticks, who attempts at eating but completely misses his mouth, dropping food onto his lap. Buntaro is probably in shock, like this is the guy his wife is sweet on, for real? But Omi, being the opportunist he is, notices Buntaro's jealousy and comments on the honor of seeing his wife Mariko dutifully fulfilling a role with Blackthorne. Buntaro is quick to shoot it down, saying that his wife's duty only lies with Toranaga, and then goes back to glaring at John. The sake at the feast never stops pouring, and Toranaga asks Psyche if he enjoyed his gift, meaning Kiku's services. Interestingly enough, Psyche only remarks on Kiku's physical beauty, seemingly disregarding her talent in entertaining or pillowing. When Nagakato asks how his father was as a young boy, Psyche starts reminiscing about Toranaga's first battle, where he skillfully beheaded Mizoguchi with a single stroke, sparking cheers from the gathering. However, Toranaga's expression remains solemn as he reflects on the past. The jovial social affair soon turns grim when Psyche insists on discussing war strategies with Toranaga and does not flinch before asking for Aizu in exchange for his aid. Now, Aizu is Yabushige's territory, so of course this demand leaves everyone shocked. Psyche seems to be having way too much fun at the expense of everyone else, and I guess I'm not the only one noticing him seizing every opportunity needed to put his brother down in front of his generals. The situation further takes a sharp turn when he shares an inappropriate story about Toranaga's childhood from the time he was sent to live with the Imatani clan as a hostage. The young boy apparently soiled himself out of fear, but the only person laughing in the room was Psyche, as everyone else understood the crudeness behind the joke. Even if the shitting himself part on top of a horse could have been funny in a much more private setting. However, in a formal dinner, cracking jokes about Toranaga being taken as a hostage clearly crosses the line. But Saiki's provocations are in no way accidental. He soon reveals what his plan has been all along. Apparently, Ishido has gotten to him before Toranaga could, offering him Sugiyama's seat on the Council of Regents in exchange for betraying Toranaga. Saiki's entire army has blocked every exit point of Ajiro and plans to hold Toranaga's entire clan hostage until the Lord surrenders himself to meet his fate in Osaka. Nagakado also receives an order from Ishido asking him to commit seppuku for killing Jozen. This shocks everyone and changes the mood of the gathering dramatically. But somehow Toranaga has still kept his calm. He's steered but not shaken and quickly switches to his political mode. Very diplomatically, Toranaga expresses his honor for taking the council's request into consideration and contemplates his situation to provide his answer on the next sundown. Is Mission Crimson Sky a no-go? In the next rainy morning, we see Blackthorne pacing in his garden, worried about what might happen if Toranaga surrenders. Mariko explains why they would all be sent to Osaka to beg for mercy, and half of Toranaga's men would be ordered to perform seppuku for their allegiance. Blackthorne once again brings up his idea to attack Osaka from the Erasmus, and although he doesn't say it directly, he hints at wanting to escape with Mariko. Now, Mariko is appalled at this idea and simply walks away without saying a word. This is not a suggestion she can consider, despite their strong feelings for each other, because after all, she is a duty-bound Japanese woman, so there are rules and codes that Mariko simply cannot break. Meanwhile, as Toranaga considers his options, we check in with the rest of the characters. Igarashi, the general with a cool eye patch serving under Yabushige, met a grim fate as he was killed. He had been sent to negotiate peace with Ishido on Yabushige's behalf after Jozen's death, but that plan is now irrelevant because Ishido is clearly not interested in Yabushige's alliance, something he made clear through Saiki, who presents a wrapped box with Igarashi's head inside. In the next scene, we witness Hiromatsu, Buntaro, and Nagakado wait outside a shrine while Toranaga meditates inside. Buntaro suggests going to Edo to warn their troops, but Hiromatsu doubts Buntaro can even make it to the border, given Saiki's army is guarding everything. When Toranaga emerges from the shrine, Nagakado asks if they can die with honor on the battlefield, but he shuns his son down by mentioning that those who have never fought a war are often the ones eager for bloodshed. As Ishido's ship arrives at Ajiro's shores, signaling a full-scale invasion, Toranaga instructs everyone to wait until he makes a decision within the next 24 hours. Is Jin onto something? When he walks through town, Lady Jin reminds Toranaga of Mariko's promise to give her a stick of his time. The daimyo acknowledges this promise, and Lady Jin finds herself in Toranaga's tent with a stick of incense burning nearby. She talks off the sacrifices of belonging to the Willow World, spending youthful years in service to great men but left with nothing, as one matures and eventually gets to the point by mentioning her dreams of creating a tea house district in Edo, where courtesans can have a guild to protect their futures. It seems like Jin is proposing a kind of early geisha class, a more refined and cultured environment for members of the Willow World even as they grow older. She pleads Toranaga to allow them to age gracefully, as they devote their entire youths to cultivate pleasure for great men. As the incense stick burns out, Toranaga dismisses her, stating that his future isn't long enough to aid in her long-term plans, but Jin politely implies that he might just be bluffing, suggesting that Toranaga anticipated Saiki's betrayal and allowed his men to cross the border regardless. While she may not know the full extent of Toranaga's strategy, she refuses to believe that Toranaga deliberately left his army vulnerable, to which he denies any intentional design. However, Lady Jin's probing leaves Toranaga feeling like she knows more than he reveals and has the capacity to perceive a plan where others see only chaos. Everyone in Ajiro seems to be preparing themselves for the worst. In the next scene, we witness Omi and Nagakado sitting in a hot spring reminiscing about the good old times. While Nagakado expresses his desire to restore the status quo, Omi longs for the life he had before the Anjin arrived. When Nagakado mentions that all they need is a solid plan to bring down as many spineless pigs as possible, their conversation is interrupted by Nobutatsu, who defends his decision by expressing a desire to avoid a gruesome death. Even if Nagakado Buntaro continues to romanticize the idea of a warrior's death. Nobutatsu humbles him by pointing out that death isn't inherently beautiful and that he had to go through a lot of emotional turmoil before betraying his own brother for power. Now, of course, that's bullshit because you can smell him being jealous of Toranaga from miles away. Nonetheless, Saiki's presence in the plot is very important as his arrival in Aizu serves to shake up the series in multiple ways, while also humanizing Toranaga by digressing on the immense burden of responsibility and expectations he carries. In this episode, we witness Toranaga becoming more than a towering figure to a man weighed down by endless challenges and obligations. Next, in a scene on the harbor as John watches the ships on Ajiro's shores, Yabushige joins him, commenting on the large pot nearby and suggesting that perhaps John wishes he had died on his first day boiling in that pot, rather than facing a slow death in war. He also adds that every time he manages to evade death, it somehow follows him again. Out of nowhere, Yabushige then proposes a sparring session to help John defend himself if his pistols were to fail in battle. But despite Yabushige's attempts to teach him sword fighting, John struggles to grasp it quickly. Frustrated, John finds himself on his back, unarmed, and this is when, in a fit of rage, Buntaro appears to point his blade at John's neck, briefly threatening him. But John is not scared to die as he has resigned himself to the seemingly inevitable confrontation. This leads Buntaro to put his sword away, leaving John confused and uncertain about what might happen next. In his tent, Toranaga updates his will, granting Lady Jin 2 cho of land in Edo in front of Mariko. This is when Buntaro enters, and despite Mariko's attempt to leave, he requests her presence. Buntaro then boldly asks permission to take John's head before they face their end against Ishido. He believes that John has only aligned with Toranaga for selfish reasons and dislikes the way he looks at Mariko. Toranaga reminds Buntaro that this act would also require him accusing Mariko of adultery, which would mean if Buntaro wanted to kill John, he would also have to kill his wife. Buntaro, in his own twisted manner, obviously loves Mariko too much to let her die and hence refuses to accuse his wife, even if she was ready to face her end. Toranaga then settles the matter by pointing out that if Mariko is not accused, then neither can John be accused. After Buntaro leaves, Toranaga then confronts Mariko about her conflicting loyalties, wanting reassurance that her primary focus remains on aiding him in seeking vengeance against her father's enemies, rather than prioritizing John's needs. This accusation exposes Mariko's real feelings, leading her to request his permission to perform seppuku by offering her wakizashi to Toranaga. In frustration, Toranaga knocks the blade to the floor before stepping outside, dismissing Mariko's request. Sadly, throughout the show, Toranaga wanted to motivate Mariko, yet his idea backfired as Mariko was now living in between the torment of her struggle to fulfilling her duties as a samurai and her love for John. Toranaga surrenders to the council. As the sun sets, Toranaga confronts Hiromatsu about his lack of defense during Saiki's insulting stories the previous night during the feast. Hiromatsu apologizes and begs for forgiveness, but Toranaga specifies that he is referring to the story about beheading Mizuguchi. We then find out that it was in no way a swift beheading, but rather 9 brutal hacks at the man's neck before his head came off. They share a laugh over this, giving us a fair idea of how long they have come together, given the decades worth of shit that they've been through. Following this, the entire group gathers when Toranaga discloses his decision to surrender. He maintains the facade of being the one who abides by the rules, insisting that the rebellion against the Taiko originates solely from Ishido's faction, and even if the entire propaganda against him is rooted in corruption, nobody has the authority to dismantle the realm. After Toranaga declares Crimson Sky as a mistake, Blackthorne loses his mind, standing up to the council and accuses Toranaga of leading them all to their deaths. Saiki then addresses his brother, stating that from that moment onward, Toranaga has no options and nothing left to pursue. Toranaga then bows to Saiki, making plans to depart for Osaka the following day. The episode ends with a shocking death. At the conclusion of Shōgun Episode 7, following Nobutatsu's kink-filled encounter with Lady Kiku, Nagakado impulsively attacks him with the intent to kill. However, his plan goes horribly awry as he slips on Nobutatsu's wet gown, hits his head on a rock, and succumbs to his injuries, causing Nobutatsu to reflect on his earlier conversation with Nagakado, emphasizing his belief about the lack of beauty in death. This turn of events is likely to have significant repercussions on the plot, With Nagakato's failed attempt and subsequent demise, Nobutatsu gains leverage and may use this incident to demand retribution from Toranaga before heading to Osaka. But however strategic Toranaga might be, he surely won't just give in after learning of his son's tragic death. The next episode will be crucial in revealing if Toranaga would embrace his Minowata lineage or be a rule follower at the mercy of the Council of Regents for the foreseeable future. How about you guys? What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment box below.
If you like our content, like it and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!